Since 1923, Roy O. Martin, a Louisiana-based wood products company, has followed the example of its founder and given back to our Louisiana communities where we live and work. Information at royomartin.com.
Louisiana Healthcare Connections is more than Medicaid. Whether you're trying to raise healthy kids or need health coverage for yourself, it helps to have good Louisiana folks on your side. Louisiana Healthcare Connections, connecting you to quality health care.
Henson Moore is interested in serving other people. He's very patriotic, and he's also very optimistic.
He just likes people. He goes out of his way to help people. A lot of it unknown to the public.
Henson Moore is a Southwest Louisiana-born statesman who has devoted the majority of his life to public service. His parents were W.H. Moore II, a self-made oil company executive, and the former Madge Pierce. Moore spent his early childhood years in the Cameron Parish communities of Hackberry and Lake Charles. When he was 12, the family moved to Baton Rouge, where he graduated from Baton Rouge High School in 1958.
Henson was the president of the student council in one of the largest high schools in the state. Just that previous summer, he'd been elected governor of Boise State.
I first met Henson at Pelican Girls State. He was a counselor, and we double dated the following year at LSU, both having dates with other people, but we sat next to each other. It was Jimmy Davis's inauguration, and he and I talked politics the whole night. His love of public service manifested itself in me, and that I began to be interested in it as well, and fell in love with him and wanted to be supportive of him and what he did in that field. When he went to LSU, he concentrated in the ROTC. And so he received the President's Medal his junior year for being the outstanding ROTC cadet.
Moore received a BA from Louisiana State University in 1961 and a Juris Doctorate from LSU Law School in 1965. After 2 years in the U.S. Army stationed in Germany, he returned to Baton Rouge to practice law and received a master's degree from LSU in 1973. His lifelong service to others began on the national stage in 1975 when he was elected to the United States House of Representatives, serving the 6th District of Louisiana. During his 12-year tenure in Congress, Moore served on several committees, including Energy and Commerce, Agriculture, Budget, and Ways and Means.
He liked running for office because he got to meet people, which is sort of his thing. But I think in a large sense, he did it out of a sense of duty. He thought he could do a good job for the people of his congressional district, which he did. And Henson would come home almost every weekend, sitting in shopping center parking lots, talking to people about their Social Security problems and any other problems they might have with the federal government where he could help.
When Moore's time in Congress ended, his dedication to public service continued. In 1987, President Reagan named him Commissioner of the Panama Canal Consultative Committee. He served as Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Energy from 1989 to 92 and was Deputy Chief of Staff to President George H.W. Bush from 1992 to 1993.
One of his jobs was to meet with the President every morning, and he'll prepare him for the business of the day. You can imagine the egos that float around among people who are working in the White House. And I have often thought that Henson's persistence, his perseverance, and the strength with which he holds his own opinions probably served him very well.
Following a lengthy career in public service, Moore returned to private legal practice. He later served as president of the American and International Forest and Paper Association. In 2007, he retired and moved back home to Baton Rouge, where he built a new home. He currently serves on the board of several foundations, including the Forever LSU campaign. He continues his lifelong service in making a difference in the lives of others.
I'm glad to call him my friend. You know, you have a lot of acquaintances in life. You have very few true friends in life, and I really prize the fact that Henson is my friend.
Henson has strong religious beliefs. He is a strong family man. He is as honest as anyone you'll ever meet. I think it's those basic characteristics that many people have, but again, Henson seems to have some of these characteristics to a higher degree than other people.
Married for 53 years to the beautiful Franklin native Carolyn Cherry, the couple has 3 children and 10 grandchildren.
His greatest gift to me has been his love and affection. But here again, his love of public service and leading people has been an inspiration to me, because I look at him and realize what a gift he has.
Hello, I'm Beth Courtney, and you've just seen a short biography of former Congressman Henson Moore, and we are so pleased to be here in his beautiful home, and thank you so much for allowing us to come in, and I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you. You were honored at the Louisiana Legends banquet, and you saw that biography. Was it surprising to see all your friends and family in that bio that evening? What was that like?
Well, it was really especially pleasing to see them, and they paid to come. And that's something, you can always get friends to come something free. But anyway, it was a great evening, and quite frankly, I feel very honored, very humbled, and people tease me to this day, oh, you're a legend, not even in my own mind, but it was great being called one.
Well, you know, we talk about being in your home right now, and one of the things I was thinking about is there are a lot of congressmen, senators, high public officials that go off to Washington, and you know, they don't come home.
Very few come home.
Very few. Why did you decide to come home?
Carol and I, from the day we got there, never felt like that was home. Even though we made good friends with some neighbors, even though our children went through high school up there, all came home to LSU because they wanted to come home, we never viewed that as a place we intended to stay. And we would come home at least twice a year. We'd come home for Christmas, come home in the summer, and bring on, back then, everybody took their families to Washington. That's not true today. But back then, that was the case. And so we never felt like it was home, and it wasn't. And we'd come home and stay in touch with people that we went to school with, or college with, or were social friends with. So we came home, contrary to the great poem, it's not like you can't go home again. We could, and we're glad we did, and we don't miss Washington a bit. I used to get back on a corporate board up there 6 times a year, but I'm off that board now. I don't get back at all, and we really don't miss it.
Well, coming home, though, you saw a lot of things, and you jumped right into activities here in Louisiana.
Up to here.
Up to here, right, exactly. One of them, of course, was Forever LSU, that campaign. And I really have always wondered why we didn't do more to raise money, private money for LSU. And you did a wonderful job in sort of highlighting that and bringing it to that level. Why do you think LSU was sort of out of the step of the rest of the public
universities? I think that was probably true with most state universities. The state supported them. And LSU got caught, like many other states did, where the states are beginning to reduce the amount of support they give a university. One of the greatest state universities in the country is University of Virginia. It only gets 8% of its money from the state of Virginia now. And to get rid of the legislature, they offered to let them keep the 8%. And the Virginia legislature said, no thanks, we'd like to keep our hand in your pocket. The fact of the matter is, I don't think the state, we see what's going on with money in the state. I don't think LSU can ever really expect to get the money it needs to be a world-class university from the state of Louisiana. It's going to have to get it from philanthropic sources. The current president of LSU gets that, and he says that, and he supports that. And so we're building through the LSU Foundation a real organization to be able to do it and to double the amount of money we're raising now.
You know, a lot of people in Louisiana love to get, you've come home, and I came home too as well, and we love the state, but a lot of people in Louisiana are born here, live here, and don't leave. Don't you think travel, you bring a perspective having lived elsewhere and traveled back home to Louisiana. Don't you think it's important to have a bigger world view? Because consequently, people don't seem to know how anyone else does it anywhere else.
I think you're right about that. And as a matter of fact, your daughter pointed out to me yesterday that Louisiana is one of the few states that has the capital expenditure budget and the budget separate. You know, they ought to be one and the same. How do you have the money to build things if you don't have the money to run things? So Louisiana's behind in that. A lot of that goes back to LSU, or Louisiana's history, and that goes back to LSU's problem too, of all the years of depending upon government. We can blame the Longs if you want to, but really at the end of the day, you blame the Louisiana citizens for it. We've believed the state ought to do things for us, and we believe that it was free or that somebody else paid for it. And we're growing out of that now. We're realizing that's not the case anymore. Louisiana does need to look outside its borders to find out how places have done things better. There's some things I hope we never learn from other states, however. You know, our food surpasses anything you're going to eat in Iowa. And it surpasses the kind of fun we have and the people we have, the joie de vivre we have, surpasses anything you're going to find in New York. But having said that, there are some things we can learn outside our state.
Well, you certainly learned a lot in your time in Washington. And when I was looking at your bio, and although I've known you for many years, I was like, wow, you were Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House under George H.W. Bush. Mm-hmm. What was your day like when you were there, when you were doing that job? Just what was it like? We all see West Wing and things on television.
That's why I don't watch that show.
You don't watch it.
Beth, it was, as I wrote in the family history I'm writing about that time in my life, I keep thinking of the famous opening lines. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, of the famous novel. It was wonderful to be inside the White House and be close to a president. Literally, I was with him all day, every day. And I'm the guy that traveled with him all over the world, as the chief of staff didn't. He thought his job would be in Washington. The truth of the matter is, when the president travels, the White House travels with him. Mm-hmm. And so I functioned as the chief of staff when we were on the road, overseas or anywhere in the country. That was wonderful. It was not good to see how things were dysfunctional or things didn't work. And that's the messy side of democracy that Winston Churchill spoke about, to see that. And then it was very unpleasant to see a man for whom you had such great respect lose, not win the election. 2 days after the election, I was on the White House South Lawn to greet him and his wife when they came in on the helicopter. And Mrs. Bush came up to me and looked at me, and all of a sudden tears just started running down her eyes, her face. I teared up as well. I mean, that was the worst of times, to see that kind of personal loss and trauma. However, President Bush was the kind of man that he bounced back very quickly. He became the George Bush that everybody knows today, wearing the goofy socks and jumping out of airplanes and that sort of thing. He's just a prince of a man, and the defeat didn't keep him down. So it was wonderful to be on the inside of all that. The way you test yourself, the way I did, is, am I making a difference? Am I doing anything to help this man carry out his vision? That's why they brought me in the White House. They thought, we need somebody to run for office. And the deputy chief of the campaign and myself met every night to sit down and try to work out how to make that work. And we both felt like we failed. We didn't succeed. And so that part of my life, while it was interesting, I have to mark it down as being, it wasn't a success.
Well, as a successful person, as a legend, as we call you, you have successes and failures, and sometimes we're tested and judged by the times we don't succeed,
well,
as you indicate. And I guess I was remembering when you ran for the United States Senate, and you did a debate with you and John Breaux were in the LPB studios, and I remember thinking the National Republican Party should leave Henson alone. They seem to be in there suggesting what tie you were wearing and suggesting things that should be done in Louisiana. And you look back on that, and I always felt like, you were only the second Republican elected to Congress since Reconstruction. Right. From Louisiana, and so you had a great 12 years serving as a congressman, and you felt like, were you well served by the national politics? Sometimes it's hard for national people to come to Louisiana.
Very hard. I can tell you some funny stories about that, but there's an old political axiom, hold your enemies close and hold your friends closer. The National Party thought it was helping. They were doing some things we weren't even aware of. Right. Turns out they weren't. Did it make a difference in the race? I don't think so. John Breaux and I were always neck and neck in the polls, and it was very hard for Louisianians to find a difference at that point in our history of a good conservative Democrat and a good conservative Republican. What's the difference? And they were so used to always voting for a Democrat, and John Breaux was a quality guy and a quality congressman. So it was very hard for them to find the difference, and we were trying to find it and to help them find it, and we just fell short.
Well, I see what's happening now as this rancor between parties, and it seems to be creeping down into Louisiana as well in our own legislature. Does that trouble you? Because I get the sense that when you and your family were in Washington, there wasn't that same rancor.
Absolutely, there was not. I'd be a fish out of water in Washington today, because when I got there, even though Republicans were unusual, we were in the minority and that sort of thing, we worked together. And some of the legislation that I happen to have felt very proud about would never have happened if the Democrats hadn't worked with me and helped make it happen. Today, that's impossible. Today, if you work with somebody on the other side, that's viewed as being a traitor, or automatically it's verboten by either party. And so neither party wants to work with the other. They want to destroy the other one.
Well, Henson, do you think that, I know, born in Hackberry, we always say Lake Charles, but actually Hackberry, then you reared in Baton Rouge and going to LSU and all. What do you attribute your success? And did you learn it early on in life? What were you like when you were, 7?
I was a terrible kid.
Were you?
My mom says I was a monster, that I believed, and I've always loved people. And that one of the people on that show said something like that about me that you put together. And I called him the other day and said, I think you nailed it. I think you said something about me I didn't even realize. That I really love people, all people. And that in Hackberry, I became the leader of all the young kids my age. Well, what do you do in Hackberry? You could go hunt alligators at age 7. We tried that. And so we got in trouble pulling the volunteer fire alarm, or doing stunts, or letting the cattle out, or doing one thing or another, because there was no organized athletics down there then, or anything like that. And so what I learned, I guess, at that age was, one, to like people, listen to them, be with them, play with them, lead them, and then hopefully lead them in the right direction. But people in Hackberry didn't think the direction was right at that time.
Well, leadership, you and I serve on a committee where we're looking for the next generation of leaders. We select students from LSU. And what do you say now to your children, your grandchildren, and those that look to you as a leader, that you recommend for them to have as a path in life? I worry about that sometime myself.
Well, I try to tell them. I don't think they listen. But I try to tell them, and I try to with my own children. And I guess, as you learn with raising children, and you know that, every now and then they'll say something and you'll think, by God, what I told them, they did remember.
Yeah.
Every now and then it comes out. But I tried. And I think that night of the Louisiana Legend dinner and event gave a perfect time to tell my grandchildren who were there, look at these people. That's what you ought to be like. No matter what it is you do in life, be the best at it. School teacher, policeman, carpenter, lawyer, doctor, doesn't make any difference. There's no ranking of occupations. It's just be the best at it. There is a ranking in that. And then give something back along the way. And I think if you live like that, thinking about, I'm going to do my best every day, really try hard to be the best at it, and then try to help and try to give something back along the way. I don't know, those are two pretty good guidelines that I've come upon in life, and I don't think I'm the first to discover them. I hope it's common knowledge. And so hopefully my grandkids came away that night hearing it once again.
Well, you came back, and one of the charges to you was to head up a commission without any money on the Battle of New Orleans. What do you see in the future? Would you like to do? Where would you like to be involved? I know you like history. You believe in public service. Where would you like to go in the next few years?
Since I've been home, I've spent time with the LSU Foundation and raising money for LSU. We've talked about certainly that commission, and that commission was interesting because the fact I do like history and I do like patriotism, and I think that here was one of the signal moments in American history that's been completely lost in history. It doesn't even appear in the history books anymore. And what you learn is the fact, if they'd had cell phones, they'd have called the battle off, because they'd have found out they'd had a meeting in Belgium and signed a treaty. Turns out, we commissioned a book and had the book written that says that's not true, that the British general had orders, even if you hear about a treaty, press on. Because the British were Machiavellian enough to know that the treaty had to be ratified, and if they held New Orleans, they'd simply say, ratify the treaty if you want to. We have New Orleans. We're keeping it. And nobody in American history knows that. It was a very important battle. That battle created us as a world power. It made people start looking at the United States differently. And without that battle, we would have taken many more decades and years to have achieved what we are today. Now we're working on a project that's very frustrating, trying to raise the money to build an interactive memorial on the battlefield down there to trace the steps of that and to wind up with a unity garden that exists nowhere in the world to celebrate the unity of the United Kingdom and the United States, which is the best of allies for 200 years. And that alliance was born on that field on that day. 200 years ago.
Alliances now seem to be in jeopardy, if you will, the United Kingdom. Not our alliance, but I mean Great Britain and European Union.
Well, that's
as an interesting
listen,
time.
They've been enemies and friends for 1,000 years. I mean, France and Britain were the worst of enemies.
Well, one of the things you've done, you've been married to the same woman for a very long time. Yes.
I think that used to be the way you did it, and I don't really understand what's happened. First of all, that I don't want to go find another wife. Secondly, it would take me 50 years to train her to be where this one is, and I think she's trained me to where that'd be a real mess to try to go find another one.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about as I was saying we've known each other a long time, but one of the things that I recall is, as looking back in history, Louisiana is a place where really great powers of the world have come in and extracted our resources. And we have been just that, a colony. And you certainly served in the energy business. You were there at the Department of Energy, and I am stunned now over our course of our lifetime how we're now talking about we are energy sufficient with fracking and all of this. Did you ever think this would happen?
No. I can remember us having very high-level meetings in the Department of Energy, looking at the numbers being forward to us by the Energy Information Administration and by the energy industry on the decline of production of fossil fuels in the United States and how that decline was going to continue. And at that point, we were something like producing only 40%. We were expecting it to go down to 30% and whatever. And so that's what really was causing us, more than the environment, although that was a part of it, to start looking at alternative fuels. And we were spending, and we spend today, billions of dollars every year in federal money and primary research and grants to various people to do research on things like electric energy, and we were looking at cold fusion and looking at all kinds of things, and we never thought we'd get here. And the fact we're here today just goes to show that you don't necessarily trust the best information coming out of government. People in business have found this, not government, although there were some discoveries we did that helped the energy industry. Underground seismographic or 3D picturing came right out of our underground nuclear tests for weapons. And we got to doing that in the Department of Energy, and somebody said, hey, that may help energy companies look underground to see what an oil reservoir looks like. And today they use that, and they use it all the time. And it really came out of the federal government. So sometimes we can work together. We can come up with some research that helps private industry. But no, I never thought we'd be here. And only the government can screw that up. If we just let it go, we're going to wind up being the energy producer like we always have been, as well as alternative forms of energy.
Well, it seems like people are always dissing the government, if you will, these days. But one of the things is public service has taken sort of a bad rap, too. And I think public service is what you've been in really all your life, too, helping the public. And do you think that maybe it's sort of a cyclical thing, how people come and go with that, or not?
No. If you look at some of the, I've got a whole series of books on American history that I've read, in some cases reread, and if you look at the terrible things Thomas Jefferson was saying about George Washington in his second term, we'd consider that today scandalous. I mean, it would even make the New York Daily News. I think it's always been that way, and I think that maybe that's one of the faults of democracy, one of the strengths of democracy. You don't get shot for saying things about your political figures. You're right. I have spent, if you look at it, my entire career either working as a lawyer in the courtroom, and we were taught that we are semi-officials of government. We're part of one of the branches of government, to being in government, to working afterwards, heading an organization or two that tried to influence government. And I'd say 98, 99% of the people at all levels in all government of the United States are what you'd want to see. They're people who are dedicated, they're trying to do the right thing, they make mistakes because they're humans. The problem is, again, it's like watching sausage being made. It isn't pretty, as we've just seen here in the state of Louisiana. But at the end of the day, they're all trying to do what's right. And what makes the press are not the people that are really sacrificing and working hard to do what's right and agonizing and really doing all the mental torture you go through to come to the right decision. They're emphasizing the people who have, like we saw the other day, one of the guys in Congress is having to resign because he in fact is a criminal.
Right.
I think if you would look at how many rotten apples we have in that political barrel, it's probably no greater than we have in the medical barrel or the legal barrel or the business barrel or any of the rest. There are people in society who are crooks, and unfortunately that's the way it is.
Well, Henson, I admire what your career has been, and I love being your friend, and thank you for allowing us to be in your home. It's great to have a conversation.
Well, listen, Beth, you're always welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Louisiana Legends. We've been with Henson Moore, a true legend who has spent all of his life in public service, and it is a pleasure to be able to honor him, and thank you for joining us. Good evening.
The Louisiana Lottery is proud to join LPB in honoring the 2016 Louisiana Legends. Contributing over $3 billion for K-12 public education, the lottery is giving Louisiana a reason to smile for 25 years and counting. Cheniere Energy values the role we play in communities where we operate and live and have provided over $1 million to worthy causes in the past year. Cheniere Energy looks forward to continuing our relationships with our neighbors in Southwest Louisiana in the years ahead.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.